Hey everyone, I'm Dana. After 32 years of marriage, I thought I knew exactly how our story would end. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when the person you built everything with turns out to have been living in a completely different reality. Let me take you back to the beginning, because that's where this whole wild journey really started. We were young when we got married, just kids fresh out of community college with big dreams and empty pockets. No rich parents, no family money, no fancy safety net. Eric had that easy smile and big personality that made everyone like him right away. He was fun, charming, and always ready for the next good time. I was the planner, the one who worried about tomorrow while he enjoyed today. We balanced each other out, or at least that's what I believed back then. Right before our wedding, my parents sat me down and told me about this trust fund my grandparents had left for me. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it was smart money, protected, set aside only in my name. They called it a safety net for whatever life might throw at me. At the time, I thought it was too cautious. I was in love. I honestly believed Eric and I would build everything together, side by side, as true partners. So I tucked that trust away in the back of my mind and walked down the aisle with hope in my heart. The early years were simple. We rented a small apartment, worked hard, and slowly started dreaming about owning a home. I landed a job in commercial real estate asset management and threw myself into it completely. Nights, weekends, tough clients. I took it all on. Eric found work in retail management. He was good with people, but his jobs never paid much more than what we needed for daily life. That was okay with me. I figured we were a team. I'd handle the big picture while he kept things light at home. But as the years rolled on, something started to shift. Every time we talked about buying our first property, I was the one researching neighborhoods, crunching numbers, meeting with lenders, and pulling money from my trust when the time was right. Eric would nod along, maybe sign a paper here and there, but he never dug into the details. He never asked how the down payment actually got covered. He just celebrated when we got the keys. That first house felt like a dream come true. We fixed it up together on weekends, painted walls, planted flowers in the yard. Friends would come over and say how lucky we were. "You two have built such a nice life," they'd say. I smiled and let them believe it. What they didn't see was that every mortgage payment, every repair, every property tax bill came straight from my accounts, my bonuses, my trust disbursements, my careful investments. Over the next 3 decades, that pattern repeated itself 5 more times. 6 homes in total, spread across 3 quiet suburbs. Each one bought with my money, maintained with my money, grown in value because of my decisions in the market. I climbed the corporate ladder, took on bigger clients, learned how to spot good deals, and turned that initial trust into a real portfolio. Eric kept working his retail jobs, covering his own car, his clothes, his occasional trips with friends. His money never touched our properties, not once. I didn't mind carrying the load at first. I actually enjoyed the work. There was something satisfying about watching those houses turn into solid investments that brought in rental income. We lived comfortably. Nice vacations now and then, a reliable car, a home that felt stable. From the outside, we looked like a successful couple who had made it through the years without kids but with plenty to show for our marriage. Eric seemed happy enough. He'd come home, kick back, and enjoy the life we had. He'd talk about our houses like they were something we built together. I never corrected him. Why would I? I thought love meant protecting the peace. I thought if I worked hard and stayed loyal, we'd grow old together in the home I had built for us. But looking back now, I can see the small cracks that were there from the start. Eric lived for the moment. He hated talking about budgets or long-term plans. Whenever I brought up retirement or extra savings, he'd wave it off with a joke. "We're doing fine, Dana. Relax a little." So I relaxed on the outside while staying sharp on the inside. I kept every document, every closing statement, every bank record organized in my own files. I told myself it was just being responsible. Friends and family always assumed everything was joint. After all, we'd been married for decades. In their eyes, those 6 homes belonged to both of us. Eric believed it too. He never once sat down to review the paperwork. He never asked whose name was on the deeds or where the money really came from. He just enjoyed the comfortable life my hard work provided. I remember one evening years ago, sitting on the porch of our main house watching the sunset. Eric was beside me with a drink in his hand, talking about how proud he was of our success. I smiled and squeezed his hand, but inside I felt a quiet weight. I had funded every single brick, every mortgage, every improvement, yet here we were, living like equal partners. That's the thing about long marriages. They can hide a lot of truths. I poured my 20s, 30s, and 40s into building something lasting. Late nights at the office, stressful deals, weekends spent reviewing contracts instead of relaxing. All while Eric coasted along, happy in his world of immediate pleasures. I never resented him for it back then. I loved him in my own way. I believe that was what marriage was. Giving more when the other person gives less, trusting that it all balances out eventually. Little did I know that those quiet sacrifices were setting the stage for everything that would come later. As time passed, our life looked picture perfect to everyone else. 6 rental properties generating steady income, a solid primary home, financial stability most couples only dream about. But underneath it all, only one of us had truly built it, and only one of us knew the full story. That's where things started to change for me. One spring, while organizing old bank statements like I did every year, I noticed patterns that didn't add up. Small cash withdrawals, strange transfers, hotel charges on weekends he said he was working. At first, I tried to brush it off, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. I had spent 32 years building a life with this man, thinking we were in it together. But I was about to discover that while I was creating our future, he had been quietly building a completely different one behind my back. That spring afternoon, sitting at our kitchen table surrounded by old bank statements, my world quietly cracked open. At first, the numbers didn't make sense. Small cash withdrawals every week, Venmo transfers to someone named Angela, charges at jewelry stores and hotels that Eric had never mentioned. My stomach dropped, but I didn't scream or cry. I just sat there, heart pounding, going through years of records with fresh eyes. I had spent over 20 years building our life on trust and hard work. Finding out my husband had been sharing pieces of himself and pieces of our money with another woman felt like a punch to the gut. But something deeper kicked in. I realized that if I exploded right then, if I demanded answers in the heat of anger, I could lose everything I had worked for. State laws can get messy in divorce, especially with long marriages. Assets get mixed up. My carefully protected properties could suddenly be on the table. So I made a different choice. I stayed quiet. I kept my face calm when Eric walked through the door that evening. I listened to his usual stories about work and friends, nodding like nothing had changed. Inside, though, everything had. Over the next 6 months, I became a detective in my own home. I watched his patterns without him ever suspecting a thing. He started taking more work retreats on weekends. His phone stayed face down all the time. He'd leave the house late at night saying a buddy needed help, but his voice had a different tone. I noticed how he pulled away from me. Less hugs, shorter conversations, quick irritation when I asked him to help with simple things around the house. The hardest part wasn't even the cheating itself. It was the way he acted like he deserved it all. He lived in homes I had paid for completely. He enjoyed the rental income that covered our comfortable lifestyle. He benefited from the stability and credit I had built over decades. Yet he still chose to give his time, attention, and extra money to her. He never once thanked me for the life we had. Instead, he started complaining that I was too focused on money, too rigid with paperwork, too obsessed with the future. I could have confronted him 100 times, but every time the words rose up, I swallowed them. I had a bigger plan. I started keeping even better records. Every receipt, every trust disbursement, every mortgage statement, every tax return, everything went into a locked digital folder and a hidden file cabinet that only I could access. I updated it every single month, like clockwork. My best friend Sydney was the only person who knew what was really happening. She'd listen to me on late-night calls, reminding me to stay strong and smart. Angela wasn't some one-time fling. She worked with him at the corporate side of his retail company. Their relationship had been going on for years, 10 full years by the time I put all the pieces together. They had inside jokes, shared trips, emotional support he should have been giving at home. Meanwhile, I was the one making sure the roof over his head stayed paid for. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone I had loved for so long could live such a double life. The betrayal stung deep, but I kept reminding myself my properties were mine. They came from my grandparents' trust, my career, my sacrifices. As long as I stayed calm and documented everything, no one could take that away. Eric's health started changing around the same time. High blood pressure turned into serious heart problems. Doctors warned him about stress, about needing to slow down and watch his emotions. He had arrhythmia that could get dangerous. I drove him to appointments, picked up his medications, and made sure he followed the basic instructions. On the surface, I was still the caring wife. Inside, I was preparing for whatever came next. He grew more bitter as his body weakened. He resented my routines, mocked my careful habits, and spent more time away when he could. I never mentioned Angela. I never corrected him when he talked about our houses or our investments. I let him stay comfortable in his fantasy that after 32 years of marriage, he owned half of everything. Looking back, that silence was my greatest strength. I wasn't being weak or scared. I was protecting what I had built with blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. Every late client meeting, every risky investment I researched for weeks, every weekend I spent reviewing contracts instead of relaxing, it had all been worth it. Those 6 homes represented my future, not just his. The years rolled on like that. Quiet observation, careful documentation, a marriage that looked normal from the outside but had become a waiting game on the inside. Eric kept living his secret life, thinking I was none the wiser. Angela stayed in the shadows, probably believing she was the one who truly understood him. I won't lie. It hurt. Some evenings I'd sit alone in one of our rental properties after checking on tenants, wondering how different things could have been if we had truly been partners. But pain has a way of sharpening your focus. I stopped wishing for the marriage I thought we had and started preparing for the reality in front of me. Then came the day everything accelerated. Eric had a serious episode at home. Chest pain, shortness of breath, the whole scary scene. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. He stabilized, but the doctors were clear. His heart was badly damaged. Any big shock, any major stress could be the end. Instead of taking it as a wake-up call, Eric seemed to get more determined. He talked more about final wishes, about making sure certain people were taken care of. I knew exactly who he meant. His health kept declining. More days in bed, more medications, more frustration. The man who once coasted through life on my efforts was now facing the end, and he wanted to rewrite the story before he left. I kept my files ready. My heart stayed steady. I had waited 10 long years, watching, learning, and protecting what was mine. Now the final chapter was approaching, and I could feel it in the air. The hospital calls started coming more frequently. His condition was getting worse fast. One afternoon, the phone rang again, and this time the voice on the other end said it was serious. Eric had suffered a major cardiac event. They had him in the ICU, hooked up to machines, fighting to stay stable. That's when I knew the moment I had prepared for was finally here. Everything I had built, everything I had stayed silent for, was about to be tested in the most public and painful way possible. But I was ready. I grabbed my folder of documents, took a deep breath, and drove to the hospital with a calm I had been practicing for years. Little did Eric know that the woman he thought he could erase from his final story still held all the cards. I pulled into the hospital parking lot that afternoon with my hands steady on the wheel, even though my mind was racing. The folder of documents sat on the passenger seat like a quiet shield. For 10 years, I had carried the weight of knowing about Angela, and now Eric's body was finally giving out. The doctors had been warning us for months, but nothing prepares you for the sight of your husband in the ICU, pale and hooked up to beeping machines. They had rushed him there after a massive cardiac event at home. Paramedics said he coded twice in the emergency room before they got him stable. When I walked into his room, the air felt thick with antiseptic and tension. Monitors tracked every heartbeat. IV lines ran into his arms. His skin looked thin and gray under the harsh lights. Dr. Patrick, a calm but serious man, pulled me aside right away. "His heart is badly damaged," he said quietly. "Any strong emotion, any sudden stress or argument could trigger something fatal. We need to keep things as peaceful as possible." I nodded, thanked him, and stepped back into the room. Eric was awake but weak. His eyes met mine for a moment, and I saw something in them. Frustration mixed with determination. Instead of seeming humbled by how close he'd come to dying, he looked like a man with unfinished business. He started talking about final arrangements almost immediately, his voice raspy but insistent. The next few days blurred together. I stayed at the hospital for long hours, bringing him whatever he needed, speaking gently to the nurses, and keeping my emotions locked down tight. Sydney came by to sit with me sometimes. She didn't say much, just held my hand and reminded me I wasn't alone. My attorney Chase checked in by phone, making sure I understood the legal ground I stood on. All the while, I could feel Eric's mind working. He was planning something. He grew obsessed with the idea of a formal will reading right there in the hospital. He didn't want to wait until he got out. If he got out. He demanded witnesses, official paperwork, and specific people in the room. When he called Angela and told her to come, his voice softened in a way I hadn't heard in years. I stood just outside the door and listened without reacting. 10 years of practice made that part almost easy. On the morning they set for the reading, the hospital room felt smaller than ever. Sunlight filtered weakly through the narrow windows. The machines kept up their steady rhythm, a constant reminder that time was running out. Eric lay propped up in bed, looking frail but with a sharp glint in his eyes. He truly believed this was his moment to set things right, his version of right. I sat in the chair beside his bed, calm on the outside, my folder resting on my lap. Inside, I replayed all the years, the properties I bought alone, the late nights, the quiet documentation, the way he had taken everything for granted. Dr. Patrick stayed in the room per hospital rules, watching the monitors closely. He had already reminded everyone again about Eric's fragile condition. My best friend Sydney arrived first. She's been like a sister since high school, strong, loyal, and the only person who knew the full truth of what I had carried alone. She gave me a small nod and sat close, her presence giving me quiet strength. Next came Chase, my estate attorney. He walked in with his professional briefcase, face neutral, but I could tell he was ready. He had reviewed every document with me over the years. He knew exactly what was about to happen. Then Angela walked through the door. She didn't look guilty or ashamed. She stepped in confidently, dressed nicely, hair done, carrying a small bag like she belonged there. Her eyes went straight to Eric, soft and full of fake concern. She barely glanced at me. It took everything in me not to react. This woman had spent a decade in my husband's life, enjoying pieces of the comfort I had built, while I stayed silent and prepared. Eric's whole face changed when he saw her. A weak smile crossed his lips. He reached out a shaky hand toward her. In that moment, after 32 years of marriage, I felt like furniture in the room. Background: the wife who had funded everything but apparently meant nothing in his final story. The tension in the air grew thicker as everyone settled. Dr. Patrick adjusted a monitor and gave us all a warning look. Eric cleared his throat and started speaking slowly, his voice low but filled with purpose. He talked about how he had thought long and hard about his final wishes. He mentioned his long relationship with Angela, calling her the one who had truly stood by him through his hardest times. He painted me as distant, cold, and too focused on work and money. I sat there listening, my face showing nothing. I had expected this. People who cheat often rewrite the past to make themselves feel better. They turn the loyal partner into the villain so their own choices look justified. It didn't surprise me, but it still hurt in a deep, quiet way. He then asked Chase to read the will he had prepared. Chase looked at me for the smallest second. I gave him a tiny nod. The room went completely still except for the beeping machines. As Chase began reading the document in his clear, professional voice, the words hit like stones. Eric was leaving everything. All 6 homes, the rental income, every property asset to Angela. Sole beneficiary. Nothing for me. After 32 years, he wanted to erase me completely and hand my life's work to the woman he had chosen over me for a decade. Angela's face lit up with pure triumph. She stood taller, a slow smile spreading across her lips as she finally looked at me. Sydney squeezed my hand tighter. The room felt charged, everyone waiting for my reaction. Tears, anger, breakdown. But I didn't give them that. I simply smiled, calm and steady, leaning forward just a little in my chair. Eric's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in them. He had expected me to crumble. He wanted to die, feeling like he had won. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but the real heartbeat of the moment was about to shift completely. I had waited years for this exact second. All the proof, all the patience, all the quiet strength I had gathered was ready to come out. I looked at my dying husband, took a slow breath, and prepared to speak the truth that would change everything in that room. I leaned forward slightly in that stiff hospital chair, my voice coming out soft but clear, like a steady stream cutting through the tension. Eric, I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised anymore. The words hung in the air while the heart monitor kept its rhythmic beeping. Everyone's eyes were on me now. Angela's triumphant smile started to freeze. Sydney held my hand a little tighter. Chase stood ready with his briefcase. I continued calmly, no yelling, no shaking, just the truth I had carried for 10 long years. I've known about Angela for a decade. I saw the withdrawals, the hotel charges, the secret messages, the weekends you disappeared. I watched you pull away from our home while living under the roof I paid for. Eric's face shifted. The smug look cracked. He tried to interrupt, his voice weak and raspy, mumbling that I was jealous, that I never understood him the way she did. But I gently raised my hand and kept going. I stayed quiet because I wanted to protect what I built, and because I knew the day would come when you tried to take it all away. The room felt smaller. Dr. Patrick glanced at the monitors, concerned about Eric's rising heart rate, but I spoke steadily. I told them there was something Eric never bothered to understand in all our 32 years together. Those 6 homes he just tried to give away in his will, they were never part of our marital property. Not even a single dollar of equity belonged to him. He stared at me, confusion mixing with anger. "That's not true," he muttered. "We bought them while we were married. Everything is shared. I have rights." That's when Chase stepped forward. He opened his briefcase and laid out a neat stack of official documents on the bedside table. Yellowed trust papers, property deeds, bank records, tax filings, all notarized and dated long before our wedding. His voice was professional and firm as he explained everything to the room. These properties were purchased entirely with funds from Dana's premarital trust, Chase said. The trust was established by her grandparents 5 years before she even met Eric. Every down payment, every mortgage payment, every repair, every tax bill came from her separate account. Eric contributed nothing. No money, no labor on the titles, no credit used. Under state law, these remain her sole and separate assets. I watched the truth land on each person. Angela's confident posture collapsed. Her smile disappeared completely, replaced by shock and embarrassment. She took a small step back, her designer bag suddenly looking out of place. All those years of waiting for her big payoff, believing she would inherit a comfortable future, vanished in seconds. The homes, the income, the equity she thought would be hers, none of it existed for her. Eric's reaction hit harder. His face went ghostly white. His breathing grew fast and shallow. He looked at the papers like they were poison, his hands trembling as he tried to reach for them. For 32 years he had lived in my houses, enjoyed the life my work created, and assumed half of it was his by default. He had complained about my obsession with money while benefiting from it every single day. Now he saw the reality. He had been a guest the entire time, with no legal claim to any of it. I kept my tone even, almost gentle. I never corrected you when you called them our houses. I let you believe what you wanted because fighting would have risked everything, but you don't get to rewrite my life's work on your way out. The silence in the room was heavy. Only the machines filled the space. Sydney looked proud beside me. Chase stood tall, the documents speaking for themselves. Dr. Patrick stayed close, monitoring Eric carefully. Angela looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Eric tried one last time, his voice cracking with frustration and weakness. He called me cold, said I had tricked him, accused me of hiding things. But the fight was draining out of him fast. The color stayed gone from his face. His eyes, once so sure of his power play, now looked lost. I leaned in a little closer. You lived comfortably because I made sure of it. I worked the long hours, made the smart choices, protected our future while you chased other things. I stayed loyal even when I knew the truth. And still, this is how you wanted to end it, trying to give away what was never yours. Tears welled up in his eyes, not from sadness exactly, but from the shock of his entire illusion crumbling. Angela stood frozen, no longer the devoted partner, just a woman who had bet on the wrong future. The power in the room had shifted completely. The man who thought he could control the ending with one final selfish act now faced the truth he had ignored for decades. Dr. Patrick stepped in quietly, suggesting we give Eric a moment to rest, his voice tight with concern over the vitals. But the damage was done. Not the kind that comes from yelling or fighting, but the deep, quiet kind that comes from seeing your whole story rewritten in front of witnesses. I sat back in my chair, still calm, still in control. All those years of patience, all the careful records, all the silent strength had led to this moment. The 6 homes I had built alone were safe. My future remained mine. The man who had taken so much without giving back finally understood what he had never earned. As the monitors continued their urgent rhythm, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The long chapter of pretending and protecting was closing. Whatever came next, I knew I had faced it with dignity and truth. The room stayed thick with unspoken words. Angela avoided everyone's eyes. Eric's breathing stayed labored. And I sat there, the woman who had built everything, finally free to decide what the real ending would be. The air in that small ICU room felt completely different after Chase finished explaining the documents. It was like a heavy curtain had finally been pulled back, letting the truth breathe. Eric's eyes stayed fixed on the papers, his mouth slightly open, more words coming out. The confidence he had walked into this moment with was gone. All that remained was shock and the slow realization that his final plan had crumbled right in front of the people he wanted to impress most. I didn't feel joy in his pain. Not really. After 32 years, there was mostly a quiet sadness for the life we could have had if he had chosen differently. But I also felt something stronger. Relief. The weight I had carried alone for a decade finally lifted. Angela stood there looking smaller, her earlier arrogance replaced by awkward silence. She muttered something about needing air and slipped out of the room without another word. No dramatic exit, just the quiet defeat of someone who had bet everything on a lie. Eric's breathing grew more labored. The monitors started beeping faster, warning tones cutting through the stillness. Dr. Patrick moved quickly, adjusting IVs and speaking softly to the nurses who hurried in. He glanced at me with a look that said this was exactly what he had warned us about. The emotional shock had hit Eric's fragile heart hard. I reached over and touched Eric's hand one last time, not out of anger, but out of the long history we shared. "I never wanted it to end like this," I whispered. "I just wanted what was mine to stay mine." He looked at me then, really looked, with eyes full of regret and fading strength. His lips moved like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe more excuses, but no clear words came. A few moments later, his body relaxed against the pillows. The monitors flatlined in a way that still echoes in my memory. Dr. Patrick called the time. After 32 years of marriage, Eric was gone. The room fell into a different kind of quiet. Sydney hugged me tight. Chase gathered the documents carefully, making sure everything was documented for the record. I sat there for a while, holding the folder that had protected my future. No tears in that moment, just a deep breath and the feeling of turning a page I had waited years to turn. In the days that followed, life moved forward in its own steady way. I handled the arrangement simply, the way Eric would have wanted in better times. Angela never reached out again. She disappeared from our world as quickly as she had tried to claim a piece of it. Friends and family who had assumed everything was jointly owned were surprised when the truth came out, but most respected the clear paper trail I had kept for so long. Those 6 homes are still mine. They continue to provide stability and income, just as I planned all those years ago. I walk through them sometimes, remembering the work that went into each one, the research, the risks, the late nights. They represent more than property now. They represent the strength I found in staying silent when it mattered most. Looking back, I don't see myself as a victim in this story. I see a woman who loved deeply, worked hard, and chose wisdom over revenge. I could have blown everything up the day I discovered the affair. I could have fought messy battles in court and risked losing pieces of what I built. Instead, I waited, prepared, and protected my peace. That patience gave me back control when it mattered most. To anyone listening who might be in a similar situation, maybe you sense something is off in your relationship, maybe you're the one carrying the financial load while your partner coasts, please hear this. Protect yourself early. Keep good records. Understand what belongs to you. Love is beautiful, but it shouldn't cost you your future. Build quietly when you need to. Stay smart, and never be afraid to speak your truth when the moment finally arrives. I still live in the same main house we shared. It feels different now, lighter, more truly mine. I've started making small changes, planting new flowers in the garden, redecorating rooms that once held heavy memories. The rental properties are thriving under my full attention. Life is opening up in ways I couldn't imagine during those silent years. Eric's passing taught me something important. We don't always get the marriage we dreamed of, but we can still create the life we deserve. I spent decades building for 2, thinking we were partners. In the end, I learned I was building for myself, even when I didn't realize it. If you're watching this and going through betrayal, health scares, or hidden truths in your own home, know that you're stronger than you think. Stay calm when the world expects you to break. Document everything. Surround yourself with people who truly see you. And when the time comes to speak, do it with clarity and grace. The truth has a way of setting things right, even if it takes years. Today I smile more easily. I sleep better. I make plans for the future that include only people who add to my life instead of taking from it. The 6 homes stand as proof that hard work and quiet strength win in the end. They aren't just houses anymore. They're chapters in a story that I get to keep writing. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment about what you would have done in my place. Would you have stayed silent for years like I did, or handled it differently? Your stories matter too. Subscribe for more real-life experiences about love, betrayal, protection, and coming out stronger on the other side. Life after Eric feels like a second chance. I'm not bitter. I'm free. And I finally get to enjoy the beautiful life I spent 32 years building. One that truly belongs to me.